With over 10 million units sold, Toyota's Vios is perhaps one of the most important models for the lineup. And here in Malaysia, we are now welcoming the new Toyota Vios with a new platform, a new transmission, lots of new technology and a new price. We are here in Langkawi to test out the new Vios and see if it's worth the money. My name is ABDULLAH, this is Malaysian Motoring, and before we get into this, be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell to notify every time we make a new upload. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the new Vios. Now, talking about the new Vios, we have to first start with its bones. So underneath this new body sits a brand new chassis, which Toyota is calling their new global architecture, which isn't actually TNGA, it's a different chassis that we're quite familiar with. But as a result, it means that this car is now longer. With a longer wheelbase, it is also wider and a little bit taller than the model that it replaces. As a result of the new chassis, that means that the Vios is now more rigid than before, which means that its suspension has been adjusted and retuned in order to give it a slightly better handling profile, which we will sample shortly. But before we get to that, we do have to address this body because the new Vios is being touted as a baby Camry. Now, from the front, you have a very large downturn grille, which is very reminiscent of the Camry, and it's flanked by a couple of full LED headlights replete with automatic high beam. Now this, as a result, makes the new Vios already appear sharper, and that's just from the front. As we go down to the sides, we have 17-inch dual-tone alloy wheels wrapped in Continental tires. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a very clear indication that Toyota thinks that this is a better handling car because they've put proper high-performance tires on it. Now, we've got the highest grade model, which is why we also get a little bit of a lip spoiler, side skirts, and a rear lower bumper thing going on, and a rear spoiler, again, to make the car look a little bit more premium. This is also the hero color for the new Vios, which is called the Spicy something, but it's Spicy something, which I think is really odd naming. But what Toyota is very proud of is this profile because it now has this fastback design, which concludes in a very pert rear end, and as far as I'm concerned, it does make the Vios look rather good. And the back is where I feel that the design concludes very well because you now have these two-piece taillights replete with an LED scrolling indicator, which I think looks really good, and you have the LED positioning lights, and overall it looks quite neat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you have this little black spoiler here and a new lower bumper garnish to make the car again look a little bit more sporty. Now, even though this is a new Vios, it hasn't compromised in one key area, which is practicality. So underneath this boot, you will find absolutely acres of space. This is something that Vios buyers absolutely love, and with the new generation, you shouldn't have any issues either. Now, it's worth noting, however, that the rear seats do not fold, which is why the tethers for the ISOFIX mounts are now mounted on the parcel shelf rather than on the back of the seats. Now, as far as I'm concerned, not being able to fold the rear seats is a little bit of a compromise because it does mean that you can't load really large items into your Vios, and that does technically make the Honda City slightly more practical in that regard. But then again, most people will just be using the boot like this, and like this, it's plenty big enough. But perhaps, in addition to its incredibly svelte new body, the biggest improvement to the Vios actually lies inside. Now, the previous generation Vios did fall foul of having a rather poorly interior with really terrible build quality and a rather lackluster design, but the new Vios certainly remedies that. So for starters, you now get better quality materials like this nice soft touch panel which extends all the way over here to the driver's side. You now get slightly more complex door trims, and the center console has been raised in order to give it a slightly more cockpit feel. You even get some more soft touch material down here by the driver's side knee in order to ensure that you remain comfortable, which I think is quite smart. And on top of that, you also have this very long center console armrest so that even when you're sat here like this, you still have somewhere to put your elbow. The seat itself is very comfortable, and with the driver's seat set up the way I like it, with the right angle and the right recline, it means that I can get very comfortable in this car. And of course, the steering wheel is both reach and rake adjustable, which means you can get it to just the right position. Now, in terms of actually interacting with the car, everything falls very easily to hand. You have single zone climate control with basically the same controls out of the Toyota Vios, but ultimately everything falls easily to hand. It's very easy to manipulate, and everything is exactly where you expect it to be. The same goes for the steering wheel, which admittedly is a unit that is shared with other Toyota and Pro models. And it also sits ahead of a digital instrument cluster, which is also shared with other Toyota and Pro models. You also get this new freestanding infotainment system, which comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which means pairing your phone up to use screen mirroring has never been quite so easy. And in terms of practicality, space has been freed up, firstly by having an electronic parking brake for this particular model, and of course you get more space in here, which even has room for the wireless charger. And admittedly, this space is not as deep as it could be, but that is in order to accommodate the rear aircon vents, which is certainly something that Malaysian buyers would appreciate. There are also plenty of cup holders, one on either end of the dash. You get big bottle holders, and ultimately there is always space for you to put things. I especially quite like this space just underneath the center console because it's large enough to hold my relatively large, very old phone, and everything just falls away easily because you can just put everything everywhere and you don't end up with a lot of clutter. That means that this would be a very practical car, not only for younger buyers who may be looking at this as a singleton, or even for younger families, because there is plenty of space to put your tat. Now, the back of the Vios also sees a massive improvement over the outgoing car thanks to this new platform. So there is now more space for you to sit, with acres of kneeroom and a decent amount of headroom despite this fastback design with this seat set up in my driving position. What I do feel like I need to point out is the fact that the seat base on this car has not been artificially shortened in order to sort of improve the visual amount of knee room, because there is a good amount of under thigh support, and this bench is very nicely scalloped both on the backrest as well as on the base itself, so it feels like I am quite corseted in here, which is certainly very welcome for a car like this. And the center tunnel has been lowered ever so slightly in order to allow for a third passenger to sit here slightly more comfortably, though of course you still have a single USB port, or rather a single USB-A and a single USB-C port back here, and the aircon vents like I mentioned earlier, which means that it is very comfortable to sit back here. Of course, you can also have your cups here in this very large cup holder. You also have more space underneath here on the door pocket, and as far as I'm concerned, there is, like I said, plenty of space. Now, in terms of the opening of the doors, they do open rather wide, which means in order to put an ISOFIX mounted seat back here, it shouldn't be too difficult. And of course, locating the mounts should be quite easy, as there are very easy to see slits in the upholstery in order to locate the feet for these ISOFIX mounted seats. And because of the longer wheelbase, it does mean that you can put a bulky rear-facing child seat in this car without too much hassle, although there is no center armrest, which I think is a little bit of a shame, as that would have completed the package as far as I'm concerned. So it's quite clear then that Toyota has very thoughtfully redesigned the new Vios in order to make it the car that everybody wants it to be. Although the tagline for this car is to defy expectations, it seems to me like Toyota has met them. And the other area where I think it may have met those expectations is in terms of the drive. So let's get back in the driver's seat and see how this new Vios is like to handle. Now, the thing about the Vios is that traditionally the way it drives has been a little bit of a sore point. Now, unless you got the Vios GR Sport, the Vios was generally quite lethargic. It was a little lackluster and not particularly inspiring behind the wheel. But with this generation, a few things have changed. What hasn't is the engine, which is the same 1.5 litre that we're very familiar with, but it's now paired to the new DCVT that's made in Sendayan for multiple brands, including Toyota. That has been paired to a remapped throttle and a remapped transmission control unit, and as a result, the powertrain alone on this car feels a lot peppier and a lot more attentive. Now, through this drive experience in Langkawi, we have driven this car up and down Gunung Raya in varying states of aggression. And what's very clear is that whether you're climbing or whether you're descending, the powertrain responds very smoothly and very naturally. And even though this is ultimately the same engine that we're used to, because of this new powertrain combination, it does mean that this vehicle is more efficient than the Vios that it replaces. And that's just the powertrain. Because in terms of the handling, that's where this car has pulled an absolutely brilliant transformation. Because now, the Vios is actually good to drive. Bear in mind that we are in a top spec non-Gazoo racing model. So this has not received any sort of special fettling from the performance buggers who retune the suspension. But despite that, although the steering wheel is numb, it's very accurate, which is what you want from a car like this. This is what 90% of Vios buyers are looking for. And in terms of the suspension, it's no longer floaty, it's no longer disconnected from the world around it. Instead, it's a lot more informative, it's a lot more talkative. You can drive this car with a lot more confidence, be it on the motorway or on smaller island roads like this. And when things get twisty, that's where you realize that yes, while this car has some degree of lean and some degree of body roll, it is never in an uncontrolled manner. So no matter what, the new Vios inspires confidence, which is certainly very, very appreciated. Now the funny thing is, if you look on paper, the new Vios is a little bit down on power and a little bit down on torque compared to the Honda City. However, in a drag race that was conducted by some executives from Toyota in a closed circuit in Thailand, the two cars actually ended up coming neck and neck, and that is down mostly to the transmission and throttle mapping. Now you put all of that together and what you end up with is a fantastic package for the majority of buyers. A lot of people buying cars like these just want a car that's good in town and good on the motorway, and the Vios certainly does both of those things very, very well. The other big improvement is in terms of fuel economy. So as I did mention earlier, this car is a lot more efficient than before. Now, we've been driving this car quite aggressively, as I mentioned, and we've been driving it quite hard through twisty turns and all that sort of nonsense. And despite that, the Vios is still returning a rough average of about 15 kilometers per litre. Now, bear in mind, again, we are driving very aggressively. In normal driving, I would expect to be able to see anywhere between 18 to 20 kilometers per litre, depending on how efficiently you drive. And bear in mind, this car does come with power, normal and eco drive modes, and we've been driving it mostly in normal or power. So despite that, you can tell that this powertrain is meant to be efficient, and that will most likely be a huge benefit to incoming buyers. Now lastly, we do have to talk about price. So the new Vios is only available in two grades with estimated pricing expected to start at about 90,000 ringgit and rise to about 96,000 ringgit for this, which is the flagship. Now, there are a few options available, such as the dual channel drive record unit, because the standard only comes with one. And I reckon that is a pretty decent option, given that you can also bundle it into the loan, so it's not like you're paying for it out of pocket. And while it represents an increase over the outgoing car, given the packaging of this vehicle and the improved engineering, the improved NVH levels and so on, it is certainly worth the money. But how does it fare in KL? Well, we'll just have to wait until we get there. Now, while you're watching this video, it should be coming out on the 19th. Now, the Vios will be officially launched tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. You can catch the live stream on most major platforms, on Toyota's website and so on. And so you can watch the unveiling with us. That's on the 20th at 8:30 p.m. But in the meantime, if you'd like to know more about Toyota Vios, please leave a comment down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And let us know what you think about the new Vios. Does this car truly defy expectations, or is it once again trying to write checks that it can't really cash? And more importantly, how will this fare in KL? We certainly look forward to having this car on test when we get back. In any case, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care and stay safe.